Hi, I'm Kevin, 42, and I guess you could say I thought the storm had already passed. After everything I went through, cutting off my parents, watching my brother's ego-driven empire crumble, and building something real with my wife and daughter, I truly believe the worst was behind us. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the past doesn't always stay buried. Sometimes it digs itself out, puts on a fresh shirt, and shows up on your doorstep holding a lawsuit. Yeah, a lawsuit. From my own brother. It started with a letter. Just a plain white envelope slipped into our mailbox on a random Tuesday. I was in the middle of making dinner, stir-fry, Emily's favorite, when Sarah walked in with that look on her face, the one that always means something's wrong but she's not sure how to say it. "There's something you should see," she said, handing me the envelope. I opened it, expecting junk mail or maybe something from the bank. But the moment I saw the first line, notice of intent to pursue legal action, I knew peace had just packed its bags and moved out. The letter was from Matt. Or more accurately, from a law office representing Matt. Apparently, he was suing me for interference with prospective economic advantage. I had to read it 3 times before it sank in. His claim? That my public and targeted sabotage, meaning the very real and very factual success of my app and the accidental social shaming that came with it, had cost him business opportunities, reputation, and emotional distress. He even attached a printout of my app's landing page as evidence. I stood there in our kitchen, holding the letter like it was a dead fish, while Sarah paced behind me muttering every creative curse word she could remember. Emily walked in halfway through the tirade and stopped short when she saw our faces. "What happened?" she asked cautiously. "Uncle Matt," I said, holding up the letter, "has decided to sue me for winning." I expected her to laugh. Instead, she looked like someone had punched her in the stomach. "You're kidding." "I wish I was." Emily stared at the floor for a long second, then said something that chilled me more than the lawsuit. "He was on campus last week." That made both Sarah and me freeze. "Wait. What?" I asked. Emily nodded. I didn't say anything because I thought maybe it was a coincidence. He said he was meeting with someone at the tech incubator. Said he was thinking of mentoring young entrepreneurs. But I think he was trying to find out more about the app. Sarah's eyes narrowed. That slime ball was stalking our daughter? Emily shrugged, but I could see the unease in her shoulders. He asked a lot of questions. About our UI, our user base. I didn't answer, obviously. Of course he didn't come at me directly. That would require a backbone. No, Matt had been circling quietly, sniffing around our progress like a scavenger looking for scraps. And now that his own business had imploded beyond repair, he decided that I was the reason he failed. Not his risky investments. Not his refusal to adapt. Not the way he alienated every client he ever had. Me. The next few days were chaos. We called our lawyer, the same one who helped me with the financial disentanglement from my parents. He read the letter twice and chuckled. "This is flimsy," he said. "But flimsy lawsuits can still cause real damage. If he's got money behind this, even a little, he can drag you through court just to make a point." I knew what that meant. Matt didn't care if he won. He just wanted to make noise. He wanted to stir the pot until someone, anyone, paid attention to him again. But that wasn't the worst part. 3 days later, Sarah got a call from my mother. "We heard about the lawsuit," she said, her voice trembling, though I couldn't tell if it was guilt or poorly disguised delight. We don't want to take sides." Sarah put her on speaker. "That's funny," she said calmly. "Because it feels like Matt's entire life has been you taking sides." There was a pause. "He's your brother," my mom said weakly. "Don't make this uglier than it has to be." I couldn't help it. I leaned toward the phone and said, "I didn't make this ugly. You did, the day you chose to ignore Emily's graduation so your golden boy wouldn't feel insecure." Click. The line went dead. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how far Matt was willing to go just to avoid facing himself. About how fragile a man must be to turn his failures into lawsuits instead of lessons. And yet, something else kept bugging me. He wasn't doing this alone. Matt had never been detail-oriented enough to build a case like this. Which meant someone, someone smarter, sneakier, was helping him. And I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly who. The next morning, I opened my inbox and found an email from an old contact, a guy I knew from way back when I was still building the app. He'd been friendly once, but we'd had a falling out when he tried to muscle his way into a leadership role I never offered him. The email's subject line read, "Thought you should know what Matt's planning." The message was short. Just a single line. "He's trying to claim he co-developed your app." I stared at the screen for a long time. This wasn't just a petty lawsuit anymore. This was war. And Matt had just stepped into a battlefield he wasn't ready for. You ever get that feeling where your pulse is steady, your face is calm, but your brain is preparing for an emotional knife fight? That was me, standing in the kitchen the next morning, coffee in hand, staring at that email like it had just crawled out of a grave and whispered, "Hey Kevin, we're not done yet." Matt wasn't just suing me. He was trying to rewrite history. Claim he co-developed my app? My app? The thing I built at 2 a.m., after back-to-back shifts, that I coded during Emily's tutoring sessions and debugged while Sarah slept on the couch beside me after working a double? He had never even seen the app until the first media feature ran. And now he was going to play the role of visionary founder who got pushed out unfairly. What was next? Telling people he invented the internet. I sat down, forwarded the email to David, my lawyer, and wrote one line. "It's worse than we thought." Within 5 minutes he was calling. "I had a feeling," David said, his tone grim. "We'll need to lock everything down. Documentation. Timelines. Original prototypes. Source code. We're going to build a digital paper trail so ironclad even Matt's imaginary investors couldn't pierce it." "Good," I said. "Because if he wants war, I'm done playing defense." Sarah walked in while I was still on the call. She listened quietly, arms folded across her chest, and when I hung up, she said what I had been too angry to consider. "Kev, what if this doesn't work? What if he drags this out for months?" I nodded, already feeling the stress sit on my shoulders like a weighted vest. "Then we outlast him," I said. "We survive longer than he can pretend." What I didn't expect. Matt wasn't just aiming low. He was throwing everything he had at me in one reckless, desperate blast. 2 days later, I received a cease and desist letter alleging unauthorized use of proprietary designs, branding conflicts, and breach of oral agreement. Oral agreement? He literally wrote in the filing that we had brainstormed app ideas over beers at a family barbecue, and that constituted a mutual commitment to pursue a joint venture. I nearly choked laughing. I remember that night. It was July 4th. He was drunk off boxed wine, trying to convince my uncle to invest in a startup idea he called furniture but like for dogs. The only thing we brainstormed was whether we had enough ice. But now that moment, that idiotic, beer-soaked ramble, had become evidence. I wasn't scared. But I was livid. Not because I thought he had a real case. But because I knew exactly what he was trying to do: muddy the waters. Drown me in paperwork. Distract me from the very thing he envied, the fact that for the first time in our lives, I wasn't in his shadow. I called Emily that night. She was still on campus, preparing for finals. "Hey kiddo," I said, keeping my voice light. "I need a favor." "Dad," she said instantly. "If it's about Uncle Matt, I already have the files." I blinked. "What?" "I saw this coming 2 months ago. You remember that dinner where he tried to corner me with questions about our UI? Yeah? I recorded it." I sat there stunned, jaw slack, while she explained. Apparently, she had started quietly documenting everything from that point on, every weird interaction, every message, every time he tried to sniff around her classes or get in touch with her friends. She even had a few professors willing to confirm Matt had approached them under false pretenses, claiming he was doing academic research. "That's my girl," I said, grinning with a mix of pride and disbelief. "We're going to burn his fantasy world to the ground." But Emily wasn't done. "Also," she added, "I found something else. Something big." I waited. "Remember that name I gave you a while back? The guy Matt said was his business advisor?" "Yeah? Well, he's not. He's not even in tech. He runs a debt consolidation company." I found a Reddit thread where 3 different people said Matt borrowed money through them using false projections. One of them's threatening to file fraud charges. I had to mute the phone for a second and just breathe. Matt had been playing with fire long before he decided to drag me into it. And now, the fuse was burning fast. The next morning, I walked into David's office with a hard drive, 2 folders, and a notebook I hadn't opened in 4 years. It contained all my early sketches, my wireframes, timelines, and meeting notes from when I was first developing the concept. David flipped through it, nodding as he scanned the dates. "This is excellent," he said. "We're going to destroy them with receipts." And that's when it hit me. I wasn't scared of losing. I was scared of how far Matt was willing to fall, and how many people he tried to drag down with him on the way. Because this wasn't about me. It never had been. It was about control. About how Matt had spent his entire life being told he was special, and now that the world had moved on without him, he couldn't stand the silence. That weekend, I got a call from a reporter. A young guy from a local tech blog who had caught wind of the lawsuit and wanted to get my side. "Off the record," he said. "Is it true your brother's trying to claim partial ownership of the app?" I didn't confirm anything. Just paused, then said, "Let me ask you something. If someone shows up at the finish line and says they helped run the race, do they deserve the trophy?" The reporter chuckled. "That's a no, then." "Print what you want," I said. "I've got nothing to hide." He ran the article the next day. The headline? Local tech developer sued by brother over app he never touched. Within 12 hours, it was trending on Twitter. People were ruthless. Some of my favorites? If entitlement was a person, its name would be Matt. Let me guess, he also invented Facebook in his garage. Imagine suing your own brother for being successful while you're living off vending machine NFTs. Matt's name became a meme. And the best part? His lawyer, the one who sent the original demand letter, withdrew 2 days later. Apparently, even they couldn't stomach the circus. But Matt wasn't done. He went full scorched earth. Started posting vague, passive-aggressive quotes on Instagram. Stuff like, "Some people get rich by stepping on others. That doesn't make them better." Emily texted me one of his stories with a single word. Cringe. Meanwhile, I kept building. The app grew. Contracts expanded. We signed our first licensing deal. Emily's name was on the design patent. And for the first time in my life, I didn't just feel proud. I felt unbothered. But I knew Matt. I knew he had one more move left. And I was right. Because one night, I came home to find a letter taped to my front door. It wasn't from a lawyer. It was handwritten. Just 5 words. "You're going to regret this." And that's when I realized. Matt hadn't filed his last attack. He had saved it. And whatever it was personal. The letter on my door was taped with blue painter's tape. That part stuck with me. Not duct tape. Not packing tape. Painter's tape. Like whoever left it didn't want to leave residue. Which was almost funny, considering the threat scribbled in uneven Sharpie across the middle. "You're going to regret this." I stared at it for a long time before peeling it off. Not because I was scared, okay, a little, but mostly because I was tired. Tired of my brother turning every setback into a full-blown crusade. Tired of being his favorite punching bag every time reality failed to match his ego. Sarah came out of the kitchen, saw the look on my face, and froze. "What now?" I held up the letter. She took it, read it twice, then nodded slowly. "Okay. Gloves off." We had always played clean. Always tried to be better than the chaos Matt dragged behind him. But this? This was something else. This was desperation turned dangerous. And I wasn't about to let him drag Emily, or anyone else I loved, down with him. We filed a police report the next morning. It felt silly at first, reporting what was technically just a note, but the officer took one look at it and said, "Given the context and ongoing lawsuit, you did the right thing." He logged it as a threatening communication. Then, he asked if we had any security footage. Sarah and I exchanged a glance. We did, thanks to the Ring camera on our porch. I pulled up the footage and rewound to midnight. There he was. Matt. Hood up, head down, walking like he was being chased by his own self-respect. He paused at the door, pulled the note from his pocket, taped it to the wood, then looked up right into the camera. No mask. Just that same smirk he wore every time he lied and thought he was getting away with it. The officer raised his eyebrows. Well, that makes this easier. He printed a still from the footage, logged it as Exhibit A, and said they'd follow up. It wasn't an arrest-level offense, yet, but it would absolutely strengthen our position if this dragged into court. Which it would. Because 2 days later, Matt doubled down. We received notice of a motion to freeze my business bank account. His argument? That the app's income might include profits from stolen intellectual property, and needed to be audited before further transactions occurred. David, my lawyer, damn near laughed himself into a hernia. This is like someone suing you for stealing a pizza after you made the dough, the sauce, and the box, he said. But because he walked past your kitchen once, he thinks he's entitled to a slice. Still, we had to respond. I spent the next 48 hours compiling invoices, patent records, timestamps, emails, text threads, everything that proved the app was mine, developed independently, and launched with zero input from Matt or his imaginary tech ambitions. I even included a particularly ironic photo from 5 years ago, a family dinner where I was sketching the app's early wireframes on a napkin, while Matt sat across from me bragging about his luxury scented candle subscription box. Idea. His exact words? Nobody has time to buy candles anymore. I'll send them artisan ones by mail. I already bought the domain. He never built it. But now he wanted credit for my execution? Not today. Not ever. Then came the real punch to the gut. Emily. She called me on a Tuesday evening, voice shaking. Dad? Uncle Matt came to my campus again. I froze. What? He showed up outside the library. Said he wanted to talk. Said he was willing to settle everything if I just... I don't know. Convinced you to let him buy into the app. I stood up so fast my chair slammed into the wall. He what? She kept going, trying to hold it together. He said he was tired of fighting. That we're family. That all he wants is to be part of something successful again. He said he's willing to drop the lawsuit if you give him a 25% stake. I was already grabbing my keys. Where are you? I asked. At the dorm. I left. He didn't follow me. Sarah was at my side in an instant. Tell her to stay inside. We're going. The drive was a blur of fury. My hands clenched the steering wheel like it was Matt's neck. Every memory, every dismissal, every insult, every time he'd shoved me aside to shine, crashed into my chest like waves. But this was different. He wasn't just messing with me. He was harassing my daughter. When we arrived, Emily was waiting in the dorm lounge. Her RA stood nearby, arms crossed like a guard dog. I hugged my daughter so tight she squeaked. I'm okay, she said. Just freaked out. I looked at the RA. Did you see him? She nodded. He said he was an alumni advisor. Showed a fake badge. I called campus security. They're reviewing footage now. That was the moment I made my decision. No more diplomacy. No more patience. This wasn't just about pride or business anymore. This was about safety. Sanity. Protection. Matt had crossed the last line. I met with David the next morning and laid it all out. I want a restraining order. I want to countersue. I want blood. David leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Then let's build a case that hits so hard, it becomes a case study in every law school. What happens when a narcissist sues a developer? We filed a counterclaim, malicious prosecution, harassment, and defamation. We submitted campus security reports, ring footage, and even a new affidavit from one of Matt's former investors, a man who claimed Matt doctored financial statements and blamed my app's success for his own investors pulling out. The investors' exact words? Matt sold a dream. Kevin built a business. That's the difference. And just when I thought the tide couldn't turn any harder in our favor, the tech blog that had covered the original lawsuit followed up with an exposé titled, Golden Boy or Grifter? Inside the Delusions of Matt Everly. The article was brutal. Every lie. Every scheme. Every desperate ploy to piggyback off someone else's work. It was all there, laid out in painful, public detail. Matt's social media went dark. Our parents called me 3 times in one night. I didn't answer. I was too busy sitting on the couch with Emily, watching her laugh for the first time in weeks. I can't believe he tried to pitch me like a hostage negotiator, she said. I chuckled. He always did think he was the smartest person in the room. Problem is, he never noticed the exits. That night, as I lay in bed beside Sarah, I realized something. Matt had always been a storm in my life. Loud. Chaotic. Unavoidable. But now, I was the shelter. And nothing, was going to tear down what I had built. The morning after the exposé dropped, my phone buzzed nonstop. Journalists, mutuals, old friends who had watched from the sidelines for years, all of them now reaching out to say what they couldn't before. We saw it. We just didn't know how bad it was. One message stood out. It was from my cousin Derek, someone who had been squarely Team Matt most of our lives. It simply said, "I'm sorry. We should have treated you better." It should have felt like closure. But it didn't. Not yet. Because Matt hadn't apologized. He hadn't retracted. He hadn't faced me like a man. He had vanished. We found out later that he fled the state. Packed up what was left of his pride and drove cross-country to start fresh. A cousin in Oregon said he showed up unannounced, gave some speech about building a new tech vision, and asked to crash for a while. He stayed 5 days. Got kicked out after trying to use their Wi-Fi to make AI-generated startup logos. I couldn't make this up if I tried. Back home, our restraining order was approved without protest. The judge read through the police reports, security footage, and lawsuit history, then looked at David and me and said, "This man is lucky he hasn't been criminally charged yet." The order barred Matt from contacting me, Emily, or Sarah in any form for the next 5 years. I watched the judge sign the paper with a sense of finality I didn't know I needed. Our counter-lawsuit? Settled in mediation. Matt didn't even show. His attorney, clearly just trying to escape the sinking ship with their license intact, offered a deal, a formal written apology, agreement to never claim involvement with the app again, and a signed statement acknowledging he fabricated multiple claims in his original lawsuit. I accepted, not because I needed his words, but because having them in writing, filed with the court, felt like framing the final piece of a long, miserable puzzle. My parents didn't reach out again. I think the silence was their final act of control. If they couldn't spin the narrative, they'd rather disappear from it. That used to hurt. Not anymore. They chose their golden child, and he burned the house down. I'm not running into that fire anymore. In the months that followed, something incredible happened. Peace. No lawsuits. No family drama. Just life. Emily finished her sophomore year at the top of her class. She was offered a summer internship at a UX firm she once dreamt about working for. They found her through the app, through our work. Her smile the day she got the offer letter? I'll remember that forever. The kind that wipes out decades of pain in one perfect second. Sarah and I finally took that vacation we'd been postponing. 2 weeks on the coast, no phones, just long walks and bad coffee and the kind of quiet you don't appreciate until you've lived through noise. She looked at me one night, toes in the sand, and said, "You came out of the fire, Kev. And you didn't just survive. You built something." She was right. I had. The app? Thriving. We expanded into 3 new regions, secured government contracts, and got nominated for an innovation award. One of the judges told me, "You're exactly the kind of founder we need more of, quiet, steady, and relentless." I nearly cried. That word, steady, used to feel like an insult. Now it felt like armor. But the real victory? I wasn't bitter anymore. Matt's name would pop up now and then, always attached to some new flop, a failed crypto podcast, a gardening app that used AI to shame your weeds, an attempt to rebrand as a mindset coach, on TikTok. But I didn't feel anger when I saw his face. Just pity. And freedom. One night, Emily knocked on my office door. She held up her phone. "It finally happened." I raised an eyebrow. "What?" "She paid the Venmo request." I blinked. "What Venmo request?" She grinned. "Madison. From that story I showed you last year?" The guy who requested $6,400 from his ex? I laughed. You're still following that saga? She just paid it. After 2 years. He posted it like a trophy. Said it's proof that karma takes her time, but she always arrives. I looked at my daughter, smart and strong and full of fire, and said, Yeah. She does. Emily tilted her head. So, what are you going to do now? You've won. You've got your peace. You've got the success. What's next? It was a fair question. I thought about it that night. Not just what I'd endured, the favoritism, the lawsuits, the threats, but what I'd built because of it. The boundaries. The business. The family. And then I opened my laptop, pulled up a blank document, and titled it, How to Build When No One Believes in You. It wasn't a blog post. It wasn't marketing. It was the start of a book. My story, raw, honest, unsanitized, meant for anyone who's ever been overlooked, underestimated, or told to sit in the background while someone else took credit for everything. Because here's the truth I finally understood. You don't need revenge. You don't need applause. You just need to own your story. And now? Mine belongs to me. No edits. No apologies. Just the whole, damn, beautiful truth.